So, I think we use the term GOAT too often in modern culture. The greatest of all time should be reserved for those who truly epitomize greatness, sustained success, and noteworthy achievements over long periods of time in whatever field they may be in. True GOATs impact their industry, their peers, and the world at large in ways that make it impossible not to respect them. You definitely don't have to like them, but you can't deny a true GOAT's impact. Comedy, more so than almost any other form of entertainment, is an extremely subjective art form. So I don't expect everyone to agree with me when I say that Dave Chappelle is hilarious. But everything I just mentioned before is not subjective, because Dave Chappelle meets all of that criteria and more. Dave Chappelle is my favorite comedian of all time, but that's not the same as being the greatest comedian of all time. It just so happens that both things are true. Dave has been doing comedy longer than he hasn't. His first attempt at stand-up was when he was 15 years old, and he's been acting and doing movies and TV since his early 20s, all the while managing to create era-defining pieces of media in damn near every decade of his career. I've already gone in-depth in previous videos about the beginning of Dave Chappelle's career and did a full breakdown of his magnum opus sketch comedy series, The Chappelle Show. Those were the good days. The struggle to climb up Hollywood's notoriously treacherous ladder, and the triumph of finally breaking through and creating his unique and irreverent vision for the world to see.
I'm rich, bitch!
Those videos told the story of how Dave became an American superstar. This video is about what happened after he achieved his wildest dreams of becoming a famous comedian and found out what every other famous celebrity since the dawn of modern civilization has also found out. Fame and money always comes with complications. I ended my last video in this series about Chappelle detailing the wildly successful and popular second season of The Chappelle Show. It's been 20 years since season 2 first aired, and I still think there's a solid argument for it being the best thing that he's ever done. With the Rick James sketch, the Prince sketch, and the Wayne Brady sketch, along with a cavalcade of other iconic and beloved skits, characters, and jokes, it's no wonder that it generated an insane amount of profit for Comedy Central through its record-breaking DVD sales. And it was at this time, when Chappelle's Show was the network's biggest cash cow, that Dave's original contract with Comedy Central was up, and he was in the process of negotiating a new deal, which, according to Dave and other sources, was priced out at around $50 million.
$50 million? I'm rich, bitch!
The interesting thing is that while all of this was going on, he was also still writing and filming sketches for the inevitable third season of the show. And this isn't necessarily where Dave's issues with the network started, but it's here where everything truly came to a head and would result in Dave leaving the show, the network, and even the country.
So where's Dave at, man?
Africa.
Africa?
Yeah.
I'm broke, bitch!
Over the years since the end of the show, Dave has been oddly candid, yet somehow simultaneously secretive about why he left the Chappelle Show. He's spoken about it multiple times in interviews, stand-up specials, and even his own YouTube mini-specials, but for whatever reason, he never really just comes out and directly says what was happening back then. And even when he is more direct, like in his infamous Oprah interview from 2006, about a year or so after he left the show, he goes into more detail about specific issues and events that caused the breakup, but you can tell that he's still holding his tongue and is very careful not to say too much.
Why you just disappeared?
I had considered walking because it was a real ugly negotiation. It's a situation where now everybody's taking credit for this and that and the other. So it was getting ridiculous.
So these are your people trying to
manipulate me. Sounds like somebody's trying to put young Dave in a compromising position. They're trying to convince me I'm insane. They were trying to get me to take psychotic medication. Very stressful for someone to constantly walk behind you and say, you're insane.
From what I've been able to gather, Dave left the show and the country for 3 reasons, which basically all boil down to paranoia, stress, and existential crisis. He was paranoid because he felt that Comedy Central was purposefully trying to make him look crazy in the media, all while secretly doing things behind the scenes to actually make him crazy. Dave often likens Hollywood and the people within it to how a pimp treats their hoes or how a slave master treats slaves. It's a game of control, manipulation, and dehumanization that Dave was forced to participate in if he wanted to progress and achieve the wealth and fame that he dreamt of since a kid. He was also feeling a lot of stress at this time, surely due to the feeling of the network he worked for trying to make him go crazy, but Also due to the work, energy, and mental fortitude it takes to create a show like The Chappelle Show. And finally, he was also facing an existential crisis related to a sketch from season 3 about racially themed pixies. Yeah, sounds pretty ridiculous, but it's true.
Oh, we have fish or chicken.
Ooh, wait! I just heard the magic words. Chicken. Go on order you a big bucket, nigga, and take a bite. You black motherfucker.
I feel like now is as good of a time as any to mention the lost episodes of The Chappelle Show, since I didn't really get into it much in my last Chappelle videos. These lost episodes were a collection of sketches that were made from the unfinished 3rd season of the show. But instead of scrapping them when Dave unceremoniously left, Comedy Central decided to package them all together in a 3-episode DVD called Chappelle Show Lost Episodes. For all my hip-hop heads out there, this is sort of comparable to Nas's Lost Tapes album, except it's got way more corporate greed and way less artistic agency. See, I told you that the 3rd season of the show was inevitable. With or without Dave Chappelle, Comedy Central was going to find a way to get their money off of his work. And when it comes to the quality of the lost episodes, there are actually some pretty great sketches in this short collection. But really, that only makes it more tragic that Chappelle and company were never able to finish everything involved with this season. The Pixie sketch was definitely a standout, and as Dave explained in his Oprah interview,
And the premise of the sketch was that every race had this like pixie, this like racial complex. But the pixie was in blackface. But the reason I had chosen blackface at the time was because this was gonna be the visual personification of the N-word. So then when I'm on the set and we're finally taping the sketch, somebody on the set that was white laughed in such a way. I know the difference of people laughing with me and people laughing at me. And it was the first time I'd ever gotten a laugh that I was uncomfortable with. I don't want black people to be disappointed in me for putting that out there.
No, you didn't want to be disappointed in yourself.
You know what, Oprah? You're right.
Yeah.
maybe this is me misremembering or imagining this, but I could have sworn that the white comedian in question who laughed just a little too hard at the racist Pixie sketch was none other than beloved but angry white man Bill Burr. I thought I had watched some interview with a bunch of comedians and Bill Burr years ago where they pressed him over being the reason that the Chappelle show ended, but I haven't been able to find that clip anywhere. It also appears that Bill and Dave are on relatively good terms today, so even if it was Bill Burr who was laughing, it seems to be water under the bridge now for both of them. And it really doesn't matter who laughed. The point is that someone did laugh, and for the first time in his career, that laugh caused Dave to actually question the morality of his own comedy. But these compounding factors, all negatively affecting Dave's mental health, and I'm sure his physical health to a certain degree as well, are what caused him to go crazy, as they said, and leave the Chappelle show and also take a spontaneous trip to Africa and a whole bunch of other fly shit you know nothing about. And I had already known most of this before I started researching for this video, but what I didn't know is that Dave apparently didn't even tell his wife and children that he left to go to Africa, which, I mean, I don't believe Dave was as crazy as the media and Comedy Central were trying to make him out to be, but that is something that someone who's not really in their right mind would do. Even if he did have a relatively reasonable explanation for doing so, still a little crazy.
He's crazy like me.
But in just 3 years, Dave had gone from beautiful success story and American darling to a psychotic moron on crack who lost his mind and lost his one chance at the big time, burning countless professional bridges in the process. Well, at least this is how the story was told to us by the press. Dave would eventually come back to the States and he started doing stand-up comedy again here and there, but for the most part, he was just kind of floating under the radar, still too disillusioned and scarred from his previous time with Hollywood to fully jump back into the limelight. And this was basically Dave's career for the next 10 years or so. In a certain respect, it was very similar to his first decade as a comedian as well. He wasn't a big star anymore, he wasn't the it guy. He was just a stand-up comedian playing clubs here and there, slowly building his fan base back up. And for most comedians of his era who got a quick taste of the limelight before flaming out like Carlos Mencia, Dane Cook, Jeff Dunham, etc., I'm sure most people assumed that this is what the rest of his career would look like. Dave himself even said as much, that he basically considered quitting and just living as a relatively unknown comedian for the rest of his life. But unlike those other guys I mentioned, and this is no disrespect to them, Dave was not a flash-in-the-pan comedian. Dave Chappelle was a child prodigy turned fully realized master of the craft. And he never lost that talent or that wit or that unique style. He wasn't dethroned while at the top. He just got tired of dealing with the Hollywood machine that fed off of his creativity and genius. Dave could have come back at any time in that period after the Chappelle show ended, but there was something so poetic and so perfect about the time that he did choose to finally step back into the limelight.
That take the brand of the United States and make it great again. It's not great again.
I still remember when Donald Trump won his first presidential election in 2016. I was in college as a liberal arts major, and the morning after he won, I had to present a collection of poems that I had written for my creative writing class. Coincidentally, one of the poems I wrote was about the personification of capitalism, misogyny, and imperialism, which just so happened to very accurately resemble a man like Donald Trump. This was a liberal arts poetry class in the Northeast of America. Basically nothing but LGBTQ women who wouldn't piss on a conservative if they were burning to death next to him. I just remember how visibly sad and shaken everyone in that class was, and the entire time all I could think of was, man, I wish I could find a way to make this funny. Like, these people clearly needed some cheering up, and I wish I was witty and charming enough to say something that could make this room full of depressed lesbians laugh, but unfortunately, I was not the man for the job. But one thing the rise of Trump did coincide with was the second rise of Dave Chappelle. On November 12th, 2016, just a few days after Trump was announced as the next president of the United States, Dave Chappelle was announced as the next host of SNL, which is almost as prestigious. And I should be transparent here and say that at this time in my life, I did not have Dave Chappelle as my favorite comedian. He was more of a funny ghost from my youth that I definitely remembered and revered, but hadn't been present enough in my life to have earned that top spot. So when I heard that he was hosting SNL out of nowhere, I got excited to revisit an old legend from my childhood. But I didn't realize at the time just how impactful he had been in my life until I saw him again on SNL 10 plus years later after the Chappelle show ended. His monologue was great. He did what Dave always has been great at doing. He touched on multiple current events topics like school shootings, guerrilla shootings, and of course, Donald Trump.
I feel bad saying it. I'm staying in a Trump hotel right now. Housekeeping comes in the morning, cleans my room, and I just, hey, good morning, housekeeping. Grab a big handful of pussy and say, boss said it was okay.
Even though it was nostalgic to see him perform again, he had a noticeable change in his comedic style. He told jokes slower, his voice had gotten deeper and more raspy. He was physically bigger and more imposing than he was back in the day. In short, he kind of looked like Uncle Iroh from Avatar: The Last Airbender after doing all those push-ups in prison. He had very clearly undergone a transformation in those years spent under the radar. Not just physically, but mentally too. This wasn't the same skinny, goofy, wide-eyed young upstart like he was back in the Chappelle show days. This was a wiser, stronger, and more precise comedian, albeit still very goofy. He joked about Trump in ways that I wish I could have, in ways that I wish other popular comedians of the time could have. He found unique and creative angles and ways to bash Trump for things thousands of other people had bashed him for, but when Dave did it, it just hit different. Most of the standout sketches of the episode were callbacks to Chappelle show characters, and I know that some people found this lazy, but for me, this was the highlight of the episode. This was my childhood come back in full force.
I know that smell anyway. Frustration and cocoa butter. Looks like we got us a Negro amongst us. I'll just put that back down, monkey.
But as nice as that nostalgia trip was, it still felt like some one-off thing. So I wasn't losing any sleep over the Chappelle show not coming back. But about a week and a half later, Netflix announced that they were partnering with Dave to drop 2 old stand-up specials in March of 2017 that he had been saving for about 2 years. These hour-long specials would be called The Age of Spin and Deep in the Heart of Texas. Now this was the news that I had been waiting to hear.
This is exactly, I don't mean to sound like Cat Williams, but this is exactly what I've been waiting for.
I had been replaying For What It's Worth and Killing Him Softly for over a decade. But now I finally would have a new Chappelle stand-up special to sink my teeth into. I still remember the hype and excitement I had watching The Age of Spin when it first dropped. The SNL appearance felt like the appetizer for this main course, and let me tell you, it was well worth the wait.
The article goes on to say I was booed off stage, which is also incorrect. I was booed. I did not leave. You understand that this year, this is a boycott for the Oscars. I say a boycott? Nigga, I haven't been working in 10 years. And I walked into the green room, and OJ was already in there. He was nice to me. He was nice to my friends. The conversation was filled with warmth and levity, humor. And as soon as the door closed, we all looked at each other like, that nigga did that shit. I could feel it.
But the special itself is one of Dave's best, in my opinion. It feels like early 2000s Dave was transported to the 2010s to give his take on all the new current events of the time. I love the giving out bubblegum to homeless people joke.
I bought $25,000 worth of bubblegum and drove around Detroit and handed it out to the homeless so they could chew it and still be hungry.
I love the Dancing with the Stars joke, the Cosby joke, and the callback to his twisted superhero idea is a classic. And of course, the jokes about the 4 times he met O.J. Simpson are probably my favorite portion of the special.
I've met O.J. Simpson on 4 different occasions in my life. And before the end of the show, I will tell you about each of those occasions.
One thing that Dave has always been pretty good at, but clearly got even better at in these Netflix specials, is crowd control. Every great performer needs to be able to control the crowd and have them eating out of the palm of their hands. Figuratively, of course. Telling the audience that he had 4 jokes about meeting O.J. Simpson at the start of the special and then appearing to end the show after only telling 3 of the jokes, only to come back out on stage to tell the 4th O.J. joke is peak crowd control. I'm sure this isn't interesting to everyone, but to anyone like me who at one time or another was trying to master this for themselves, Dave is a great study in how to keep an audience captivated and in your pocket. The special is called The Age of Spin because, from Dave's perspective, the times we live in now are more controlled by the media than any others he's ever seen. Every story is twisted and constructed in a specific way to tell a story that may not be the actual truth. The people of today are also oversaturated and exposed to news and tragedy.
This is the age of spin. The age where nobody knows what the fuck they're even looking at. How can you care about anything when you know every goddamn thing? Your generation is just determined to be angry.
Considering this title and that explanation, it's fitting that Dave also makes his first mention of the trans community in this special, and we will of course get into this more deeply later, but for now, I can confidently say that Dave makes a couple jokes here about LGBTQ people that are a little unoriginal and bland in terms of creativity, but at this time, I didn't feel like he was saying anything that was truly controversial. Oh, how wrong I would end up being about that.
I think, okay, again, of all those letters, the T has the toughest road ahead. In fact, I think the T should stand for tough road ahead. I was like, how the fuck are transgender people beating black people in the discrimination Olympics? I used to do business with a transgender in Hollywood. And then she walked to the head of the conference table, stare at us all, reach in her purse, pull her old dick out and throw it on the table. Let's talk business, gentlemen. Ah!
But all in all, I really like this special, and if I had to give it a rating, I'd say it's about an 8 out of 10, just a step lower than Killing Them Softly, but definitely one of the best he's ever done. The second special that dropped with The Age of Spin was called Deep in the Heart of Texas, and it felt like a solid add-on to the first special. I actually don't have much to say about it specifically. It's still pretty funny, but it just doesn't have too many memorable jokes or moments, all things considered. And with the success of these 2 specials, Netflix and Dave made a lot of money, and Dave was now officially back in the limelight as an A-list star. It felt like all those years spent living in relative obscurity after the Chappelle show ended had never even happened, and Dave was just always here being hilarious. But as great as these first 2 specials were, it was the next 2 that solidified him as my favorite comedian of all time.
So I say a lot of mean things, but you guys gotta remember, I'm not saying it to be mean, I'm saying it because it's funny. And everything's funny till it happens to you.
Later in that year, after the success of The Age of Spin and Deep in the Heart of Texas, Netflix announced 2 more specials that would be coming out at the end of the year, and these would be brand spanking new, freshly made stand-up specials from Dave. They would be called Equanimity and The Bird Revelation. Equanimity was technically the first of these specials, but for reasons that will be clear later in the video, I'll hold off on that one for now and just talk about The Bird Revelation. The Bird Revelation is one of my favorite stand-up specials of all time. It's uncharacteristically intimate and small for a big-time comedian's hour-long special. It reminds me a lot of Kendrick Lamar's To Pimp a Butterfly tour, where Kendrick purposefully chose smaller venues because they fit the mood of that album's music better than big arenas and stadiums. But it's not just the environment that was unique for this special. The style of joke-telling in this special was also something I had never really seen before. Half of the special was Chappelle's typical style of jokes, but the other half were these long-winded stories and analogies, some of which weren't even that funny, but were undeniably captivating and just as enthralling as his standard jokes are. This special was largely about the Me Too movement, which was really catching steam at this time, and Dave tells stories about the apartheid of South Africa and how the cure for Hollywood could be found in that apartheid of South Africa.
The cure for LA is in South Africa. You motherfuckers need truth and reconciliation with one another. Because the end of apartheid should have been a fucking bloodbath by any metric in human history, and it wasn't. And the only reason it wasn't is because Desmond Tutu and Mandela and all these guys figured out that if a system is corrupt, then the people who adhere to the system and are incentivized by that system are not criminals. They are victims. And that the system itself must be tried. But because how systems work is so compartmentalized as far as information, the only way we can figure out what the system is if everybody says what they did. Tell them how you participated.
He talks about the duality of R. Kelly being a man who made inspiring, beautiful music while also urinating on minors in his spare time. He talks about women who allowed the unwanted sexual advances of people like Louis C.K. to stop them from achieving their dreams, and how even though what Louis C.K. did was clearly wrong, it's a good thing people like Martin Luther King Jr. didn't have spirits or dreams as weak as theirs. But my favorite aspect of this special is that Dave, more so than he had ever been to that point, finally talked about himself.
You wanna know what happened to me? Nah.
Move this man!
But he really gave us a look behind the curtain to see how he processed certain things. He mentions being pissed off when he had to watch Key and Peele and other comedians of that time make similar shows to the Chappelle Show while he just made scraps from the network during his hiatus. He mentioned how he never really wants to be a hero because heroes die horrible deaths.
And people would come up to me on the street and be like, yo, nigga, every once in a while. Most people thought I was crazy, but sometimes people come, yo, nigga, you did the right thing, man. You my hero. Nigga, I don't want to be your hero. I want to be rich. All I wanted to be was Paul Revere. I just needed one heroic moment, you understand? Paul Revere's ride was only one night. And then 40 years of him being like, hey, y'all, remember that time everybody was asleep and I was up and the British was coming? Boy, it's a good thing I was awake, nigga. Everybody be dead.
But most importantly, he finally talks about why he left the Chappelle Show and explains the manipulative beast that is Hollywood. Granted, he does this by making a very long-winded analogy about a pimp named Iceberg Slim who managed to somehow get a few more years of servitude out of one of his best hoes when she was at the end of her rope.
Iceberg Slim breaks down some of the coldest capitalist concepts I've ever heard in my life. He describes in detail how these men break women so that they will give them the money that they make with their own bodies. Do you know what the phrase mileage on a hoe means? Mileage on a hoe is a very wild concept. It means that pimps understand there's a finite amount of bad shit a person can do before they'll lose their fucking mind. And a good pimp can look at a woman that he's never seen before and call it. She's good for 500 fucks. That's her mileage. Anything over that, that bitch is gonna spill. They do it to you. Why the fuck you think most of us work from 9 to 5? 9 to 6 might kill a bitch.
I'm sure most of you who are watching this video have probably seen this special already, and you probably know how good it is. But if you haven't seen it, I'm telling you, you need to watch this special. It's one of the most fascinating stand-up specials I've ever seen. And at the time I watched it, it gave me a whole new outlook on Chappelle as a performer, but also Chappelle as a person.
You know, if you black in show business and do too well, it's scary, nigga. Like, you gotta get the fuck out of the casino while the getting's good, while you're still winning. If you don't walk away from the table, that's how niggas get Kevin Harted. That's my man. I'm just saying, if he got a sex tape out, well, it's just a matter of time for me.
Now, let's get to Equanimity, which is another one of Dave's best specials in my opinion. Funnily enough, he actually says that this special was meant to be the last one that he's doing for Netflix, which, I mean, wow, what a fucking liar. But in this special, he jokes about how he was never actually from the hood, but people never questioned it, so he just kind of ran with the idea his whole career, and he did so to be accepted by the streets because that would be an easier way of getting famous.
Common misconception about me in DC, a lot of people think I'm from the hood. That's not true. But I never bothered to correct anybody because I wanted the streets to embrace me. Like sometimes I'll hang out with rappers like Nas and them, and these motherfuckers will start talking about the projects. Yo, it was wild in the PJs, yo. And I'll be like, word, nigga, word. But I don't know. My parents did just well enough so that I could grow up poor around white people.
And I don't know why, but I really love this Amish joke he tells near the end.
All the Amish people around my way know me too. Not from television, obviously. Because when I see them horse and buggies, I'll pull the Porsche over and talk to them. Ezekiel, are you sure that God doesn't want you to have any of this technology or this energy? Huh? I can't hear you, nigga. Let me turn this air conditioner off. What did you say?
He also talks about Trump again, and he mentions how he really wishes he never said that shit about giving Trump a chance on SNL.
And at the end of the monologue, I don't even remember what I said. I said something like, you know, fuck it, like we're historically disenfranchised and we're gonna give him, something about we're gonna give him a chance if he gives us a chance. I don't know what I said, but whatever I said, I really wish I didn't say that shit. It was not worth the trouble.
But at the end of the special, he tells another long story similar to the end of the Bird revelation, but this time about Emmett Till and how his death and subsequent historical outrage was all based on a lie. And he connects this to Trump by saying that he hopes Trump is the lie that brings us all together. Yeah, about that. Dave is an undeniably great comedian and performer, but man, are some of his politics and political predictions fucking garbage. But this special has a clear feeling of reflection and a man experiencing a new world that he doesn't fully understand yet or enjoy as much as he did in his own time. But regardless, he's still trying to adapt and figure out how to overcome that. He talks about feeling his age for the first time in exactly as crude of a way as you would expect Dave Chappelle to do.
You know how I know I'm getting old? This is embarrassing, but I'm not gonna lie, I was jerking off, like. And I was like really sweating it out. And this is when I knew I was old. I just gave up in the middle, like nothing even happened.
Also, very fitting that he's holding a vape throughout this special because 1, his voice is noticeably even more raspy than it was in his previous specials, and 2, because it just seems like a move that an old guy who's trying to stay hip would do. Dave specifically mentions how he hates how sensitive people are nowadays and how the whole world is turned to, in his words,
bitch-ass niggas.
He says this bitch-assness is the biggest barrier in him wanting to continue to do these big specials, which, again, what a liar. This special is also where he first gets into the public reaction to his trans jokes. And I think now is as good of a time as any to finally dive headfirst into this whole trans joke fiasco. This is going to encapsulate at least 2.5 of these specials, so buckle up and get some snacks if you haven't already. If I was diligent enough to carefully place ads in these videos, I would put one right here. Dave tells a story about a fan who wrote a very endearing letter about how they were such a big supporter of his, but how they were devastated when they heard him joke about trans people. This is when Dave says that he never apologizes for anything that he says on stage, but he does feel sorry that certain people are offended by his jokes.
As a policy, you gotta understand, I never feel bad about anything I say up here.
But it was the weirdest thing. Like, when I read this letter, the shit made me feel bad. I didn't feel bad about what I said, you understand? I felt bad that I made somebody else feel bad.
He specifically brings up Caitlyn Jenner and says his issue is not with trans people or the idea of changing your gender. His issue is that to him, it feels like the world is only accepting of the trans movement and the cause has gained so much ground so quickly because white men are the ones who are doing it. And as a black man who has seen his people struggle for acceptance and understanding for centuries, this makes him less hopeful for his own cause, and that this whole trans rights movement is just more of white men doing whatever they want to do, which is what white men have done since the dawn of history.
And I cannot shake this awful suspicion that the only reason everybody is talking about transgenders is because white men want to do it. If it was just women that felt that way, or black dudes and Mexican dudes being like, hey y'all, we feel like girls inside, they'd be like, shut up nigger, no one asked you how you felt. You never asked yourself why it was easier for Bruce Jenner to change his gender than it was for Cassius Clay to change his fucking name?
And what Dave is saying here is just a more lengthy explanation of what Paperboy from Atlanta said back in 2014.
Caitlyn Jenner is just doing what rich white men been doing since the dawn of time, which is whatever the hell he want. So why should I care? What make him so special?
Dave Chappelle makes fun of everyone. Every race, color, religion, sexuality, nationality, municipality. So to him, making fun of trans people is just another day at the office. The issue comes in two places. One, the jokes he makes about trans people, for the most part, and especially in these specials, are usually just not very funny. This is coming from me, the biggest Dave Chappelle glazer out there. Most of these are just bad unk jokes that come less from a place of creative wit, like most of Dave's other material, and more from a basic ignorance of the subject matter. And two, trans rights were and kind of still are a pretty hot button issue in the world. Trans people were and are legitimately being harassed, beaten, and murdered just for existing. And many of this is due to ignorance of what being trans actually entails and the things that these people go through on a daily basis. To the trans community, Dave's jokes perpetuate the same dehumanizing narratives that cause them to be attacked. Dave says in this special and in many others that he doesn't agree with hate or violence against trans people, and he wants nothing to do with anyone who does.
Man, Dave, if you're writing all these jokes, do you have a problem with transgender people? And the answer is absolutely not. The fuck do you guys think I am? I don't understand all the choices that people make, but I do understand that life is hard and that those types of choices do not disqualify you from a life with dignity and happiness and safety in it.
But at the same time, he's still willing to give those people jokes and material that they can use to perpetuate that hate and violence. So it's kind of a wash at the end of the day. Ironically, it's very similar to Dave's existential crisis regarding the pixie joke from the Chappelle show. Dave told a joke he originally thought was funny, not realizing the negative implications the joke could have on his community if the wrong people got a hold of it. It's the whole laughing at someone, not with someone trope. It's just funny that Dave could see then how black jokes that perpetuate negative stereotypes could be harmful to his culture, but he doesn't really get the connection of how jokes about another community could be harmful to them. Or maybe he does understand that and has just decided that other people's reactions to his material are out of his control. As someone who has been a fan of Dave long before his trans jokes and has remained a fan since he started doing them, I've come to this conclusion. Dave Chappelle is hilarious with or without trans jokes. I would rather he not do them anymore, but if he does, I would like him to at least make them good trans jokes, which most of his specials are sorely lacking. Some actually are good jokes, but most are trash. If someone tells me they don't like Dave because of the trans jokes, I completely understand. Everything ain't for everybody, and everyone has a line. But also, I don't think Dave should be held responsible for how his jokes are falsely perceived or used as fuel for hatred for trans people. Dave doesn't hate trans people. He just thinks that there's comedy to be found in the idea of being trans, which deep down, I think most trans people would agree with. Good trans jokes exist. Good trans comedians exist. And I'm sure trans people love comedy just like any other group loves comedy. The main thing I hold against Dave regarding his trans jokes is that he wasted 2 f***ing specials insisting on joking about trans people just because he wanted to troll a group of people who tried to cancel him. Now, those specials forever remain as the worst things he's ever done in his career, which is crazy because this is the same man who also wrote and starred in Half-Baked. There we go. Took 3 whole videos, but I finally got a shitty Half-Baked joke in there. I feel accomplished. Alright, now that that's done, unfortunately, we now have to talk about Sticks and Stones. I'm just gonna get this out of the way now. I do not like this special. This is easily his worst stand-up special ever, and even though I do think some of the hate he got for it was unwarranted and overboard, he definitely deserved to get shit on for it. And you might think I feel this way about this special because of how hard he went on the whole trans joke controversy, but you would only be half right. It wasn't just the trans jokes that ruined this special. Dave just didn't feel like he was on his game with this one. He felt way more aggressive and standoffish than funny and entertaining. Almost like his goal with this special was to scold the audience rather than to make us laugh. I don't like to use the word cringe or cringy because I think it should be reserved for things that actually make me physically cringe with discomfort or secondhand embarrassment. But this part right here is legitimately cringeworthy.
I want to see if you can guess who it is I'm doing an impression of. All right, let me get into character. You gotta guess who it is, though. Hey, if you do anything wrong in your life, and I find out about it, I'm gonna try to take everything away from you. And I don't care when I find out. Could be today, tomorrow, 15, 20 years from now. If I find out, you're fucking finished. That's you. That's why I don't be coming out doing comedy all the time, because y'all niggas is the worst motherfuckers I've ever tried to entertain in my fucking life.
Just based off of this cancel culture joke, you can tell Dave did this special because he was angry at the world for being too easily offended and wanting to ruin celebrities' careers by canceling them, even though only like 2 celebrities have ever been successfully canceled by the public opinion, and they were both objectively monsters. He goes on this whole tirade about Kevin Hart being removed from hosting the Oscars as if they just took it from him, when in reality, if Kevin had just said, "I apologize for those insensitive jokes from the jump," and promised that he had grown a lot since then and would never joke about violence against gay people going forward, he definitely could have kept his hosting job, and then he could have just gone back to saying whatever he wanted after it was over. He also tells this joke about Comedy Central censoring the groups he can and can't talk about and why.
Why is it that I can say the word nigga with impunity, but I can't say the word fat? Because, David, you are not gay. I said, well, Renee, I'm not a nigger either.
This is kind of disingenuous as well because the woman means Dave can say nigga because he's black, not because he's a nigger. But he can't say that other word because he's not part of that community. And you can disagree with censorship in general, but the line of thinking that Dave uses for this joke just doesn't really add up when you really analyze it. He also does a lot of reused jokes from previous specials in this one. He recycles R. Kelly jokes, poor white people jokes, Michael Jackson jokes, as well as a lot of ignorant trans jokes, again. And this was all disappointing to see because part of what made Dave great was that his jokes were usually so creative that you couldn't get that type of humor anywhere else. But Sticks and Stones has a lot of generic-ass jokes that any basic comedian could have thought of. But I will say that his Jussie Smollett joke is pretty great, and there's still some classic Chappelle greatness to be found in this special.
Y'all never heard of Jussie Smollett? Jussie Smollett is an actor from France. The gay community started accusing African-American community of being homophobic for not supporting him. What they didn't understand is that we were supporting him with our silence. Because we understood that this nigga was clearly lying.
This was Dave's most controversial special yet. Supporters of the trans movement were upset with Dave because he wouldn't stop with the trans jokes, and supporters of Dave like myself were upset with him because he wouldn't stop with the trans jokes. It wasn't even like everyone was offended. We were just tired of hearing about that. I know a lot of people who stopped watching Dave's specials after this one because They were just tired of the whole controversy and didn't want to hear him talk about it anymore. But despite all of this, he did still have a lot of supporters who were down to ride or die for him, and even though I wasn't that steadfast in it, I definitely was not going to miss out on whatever he was doing next just because I didn't like this special. Unfortunately though, it turned out the whole world was going to be missing out on a lot going forward because a year after Sticks and Stones dropped, COVID dropped. Everyone was social distancing and the world was basically shut down for a year. But Dave still managed to work during the crisis and threw together a series of shows in his very large backyard where he could do some comedy and give his thoughts about the state of the world. He also ended up releasing a full documentary about this time period accompanied by the very funny comedian Michelle Wolf. But unfortunately, I've never seen it. My sister, who has seen it, told me it's pretty good, and I trust her opinion on most things when it comes to film, so hopefully one day I'll get to watch it. What I have seen, though, is Dave's half-hour special that he released during this time titled 846, which is a reference to the amount of time a police officer sat on the neck of Eric Garner. I mean Philando Castile. I mean Sean Bell. No, I mean Tamir Rice. No, I mean Michael Brown. No, I mean Sandra Bland. No, not Oscar Grant. I mean George Floyd. George Floyd, there we go. Sorry, sometimes it's hard to remember which black person was killed and which way by the police. This mini special feels a lot like the Bird Revelation special in that it's not as goofy and joke heavy as his usual material. If anything, this special is even more extreme in the serious lesson teaching direction than the Bird Revelation was. I think that's something that people have really come to appreciate about Dave since he's come back. We always knew that he was funny, but specials like these show that he's also very wise and is a masterful storyteller with or without comedy. But in this special, he says something that he's famously said before, but this time he did it without the masking scent of comedy.
Why would anyone care what their favorite comedian thinks after they saw a police officer kneel on a man's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds? Answer me. Do you want to see a celebrity right now? Do we give a fuck what Ja Rule thinks? Does it matter about celebrity? No.
Why you care so much what the Dixie Chicks say? It's not like they political scientists and nothing. They just bitches that can sing good. You know what I mean? Stop worshiping celebrities so much. Just don't listen, pay attention. I remember right around September 11th, Ja Rule was on MTV. That's what they said. We got Ja Rule on the phone. Let's see what Ja's thoughts are on this tragedy. Who gives a fuck what Ja Rule thinks at a time like this, nigga? This is ridiculous. I think when bad shit happens to me, I'll be in the crib like, oh my God, this is terrible. Could somebody please find Ja Rule, get hold of this motherfucker so I can make sense of all this. Where is Ja?
Where's Ja is a classic Chappelle joke about this phenomenon, but seriously, why the f do we need celebrities we've never met and have no connection to the issues that we actually care about? Why do we need them to give their opinion on those issues? Granted, DJ Khaled, a Palestinian American, staying quiet about Palestine right now is a little weird, but do you really need DJ Khaled to speak up about that shit? Like, who the f cares what DJ Khaled thinks about Palestine? Oh, I guess Dave Chappelle cares. Well, nobody's perfect, I guess. And Dave would probably admit to that, as he also says in this special, that people like him not because he's the perfect role model, but because we don't expect Dave to lie to us. Except, of course, when it comes to what will actually be his final special.
The only reason people want to hear from people like me is because you trust me. You don't expect me to be perfect, but I don't lie to you. I'm just a guy, and I don't lie to you. And every institution that we trust lies to us.
He ends this mini special with the story of Chris Dorner, the black cop who turned on the police after he realized how corrupt the system of policing was and ended up killing multiple cops and their family members until he was hunted into the woods by an army of police where they basically killed the shit out of him, in layman's terms. And Dave says that if that's how cops would rise up together to take down someone who hurt one of their own, why do they act surprised when we do the same when they kill one of us? It's clearly not supposed to be as grand in terms of scale and effort as his full hour-long specials were. But I do really like this special, and there's a lot of feelings and lessons Dave expresses throughout it that I think are really important. Dave sort of went on a run around the COVID era and a year or two after of a lot of smaller scale, shorter specials relating to very specific incidents or events in his life. He released Unforgiven, which was basically the first ever stand-up diss record aimed at Comedy Central for how dirty Dave felt they did him back in the day with the Chappelle Show. But it was also about how they were continuing to do him dirty by releasing the Chappelle Show on streaming sites without paying Dave for it and refusing to give him his creative license and the rights to his show back. This is another example of Dave coming off as more confrontational than funny. But this time I actually like this special compared to Sticks and Stones because, for one, Dave is attacking a corporation and a network, not a group of marginalized people. And for two, he actually has a legitimate gripe that goes back to the first days of the entertainment industry. Networks and higher-ups at these networks have been finessing talent out of their hard-earned money for years, and they do this through devious contracts that aren't fully explained to the talent, or they force them into high-pressure situations that coerce them into making poor decisions in regards to signing bad contracts. Dave has carried a grudge with Comedy Central for decades because of how they treated him when he worked there, and this special was a call to action for us, the fans of The Chappelle Show, to support Dave by not supporting The Chappelle Show. This whole cause would be expounded upon with Dave's next mini special called Redemption Song, where he confirms that the boycott he called for worked, and he finally got out of his deal with Comedy Central and got the rights to his likeness and The Chappelle Show back from them. It should be noted here that during this whole ordeal, Netflix was apparently very understanding and cooperative with Dave when he asked them to take The Chappelle Show off their network until he could figure out a way to get paid for it. According to Dave, the higher-ups at Netflix listened and removed the show without hesitation as soon as he asked them to. Who would have thought that Netflix, out of all the companies, the literal OG titan of the streaming industry, actually gave a fuck about the artists that they employed? Granted, not every artist is Dave Chappelle, but still. I guess that really speaks to why Dave loves working with and doing specials for Netflix so much. I even remember when the pushback on Dave's trans jokes first started and people were applying pressure to Netflix to remove Dave's specials from their platform. And Netflix was like, nah, we're gonna rock with Dave on this one. And I could understand this making you upset with Netflix if you were one of those people that supported Dave's removal. But you have to admit that a network standing behind a controversial artist that they employ is pretty crazy and unprecedented, especially in today's day and age. You know what? Good Netflix. Now please bring back the Get Down and Mindhunter. If for no other reason than to make the fans of both shows finally shut up and stop bitching about them being canceled. But anyway, it had now been 2 years since Dave dropped Sticks and Stones, and in that time he had done a lot of small stuff, the mini specials, the documentary about some of the mini specials. He hosted SNL again after Biden won in 2020, but he had yet to drop another big stand-up special. This is where he drops The Closer, which, yet again, was advertised and implied to be his final special. I mean, do I even have to say it again at this point?
Fucking lied!
But The Closer was very anticipated for me specifically because even though I wasn't a fan of Sticks and Stones, I was a fan of all of the smaller scale specials that he had done since then. So all I could hope for was that Dave was finally over his fixation on trans jokes and attacking his audience and was finally back to just being the hilarious and sagely genius that we had all come to know and love.
These transgenders, these niggas want me dead. Cancel J.K. Rowling. My God, J.K. Rowling wrote all the Harry Potter books by herself. Gender is a fact. You have to look at it from a woman's perspective. A nigga came up to me on the street the other day. He said, "Careful, Dave, they after you." I said, "What?" One they or many theys?
Move this man! This is bullshit.
Turns out he hadn't quite gotten that bullshit out of his system yet. Now, I should point out that The Closer is much better than Sticks and Stones. There are definitely some great jokes here, like the black people beating up Asian people epidemic being compared to what Dave's body was going through during COVID when he had the virus. There's also the Ann's the black feminist who hoped all white feminists got tear gassed, Clifford the big red joke, and how he misses old school gays. There's even some good Wise Dave segments, like the story about how a former slave turned slave master and how it's similar to how Hollywood oppression and oppression at large works in a societal structure. I say all this to say there is really good shit here, and I don't think that this should be ignored or forgotten. But Jesus Christ, this nigga keeps doubling down on this trans shit in the worst way ever. Just as a general rule, if you ever find yourself defending and agreeing with J.K. Rowling about anything that is not directly Harry Potter related, you should probably stop what you're doing and reflect on your opinion, because you are more than likely very much in the wrong. He also makes the classic ignorant ass mistake of confusing gender with biological sex, and then, after yet again saying that his biggest problem with the trans community is that it feels like another way for white men to do whatever they want, which still completely ignores the high number of minorities who are also trans but don't have nearly the same social power as rich white men, he then wraps it all up with the infamous Daphne story.
I want your community to know that one of the coolest people I ever met was a transgender woman in San Francisco. Daphne Dworman is her name. And the hardest thing for a person to do is go against their tribe if they disagree with their tribe. But Daphne did that for me. And when she did that, the trans community dragged that bitch all over Twitter. But 6 days after that wonderful night I described to you, my friend Daphne killed herself.
The Daphne story has been talked to death over the last few years, and I don't think I have much to add to this discourse you haven't already heard before, but my opinion on Dave's story and the public outcry after it is this. I think it's a very well-told story, the same way most of Chappelle's ending stories like this are, but the issue I have with it is that it has big, I have black friends, so I can't be racist energy to it. And it's like Dave's point is, yeah, I make jokes about trans people, but trans people bullied a trans woman who defended me to the point where she unalived herself. So that somehow makes it okay for me to tell trans jokes? Like, I don't get what the ultimate correlation between those two things is. Trans people shouldn't have bullied Daphne, that's 100% true. But you also need to stop telling trans jokes. Like, nothing about Daphne's situation changes yours. But in defense of Dave, and really this is more like in defense of Daphne, I will say the critics of Chappelle were way too apathetic to the tragedy of a trans woman being bullied into unaliving herself by her own people. Like, that is a serious tragedy, and I think those who attacked Daphne and pushed her to that are scumbags, and that should be more of the focus here. But again, this has nothing to do with Dave and his trans jokes. Dave says empathy is bisexual. It goes both ways.
Empathy is bisexual. It must go both ways.
But this whole special feels more like an exercise in pettiness rather than empathy. I also want to note that outside of the trans material, he's still recycling a bunch of old jokes and topics from previous specials again in this special, which is now doubly disappointing since he just did the same thing in Sticks and Stones 2 years prior. The closer brought with it as much, if not more, controversy than Sticks and Stones did. But the craziest thing to me is that a year after its release, Dave will go on to call the closer a masterpiece. No, Dave, this is a masterpiece. This is a masterpiece. This is mid. This is pure, unadulterated mid. The fallout from the closer was bad. Like, a lot of longtime fans and supporters of Dave, like me, had to come to the realization that Dave Chappelle might actually be washed. Haters of Dave had plenty of new ammunition to continue their assault on his character and his career, and anyone who was still defending his work to look crazier and crazier in the public eye, because most rational people could tell that this was clearly not Dave's best work. Not even close. It got to the point where, when Dave was supposed to be honored at his old high school, the Duke Ellington School for Performing Arts, in late 2021, which was shortly after the closer released, Dave was met with massive pushback by the students of the school for his trans jokes. In response to this, Dave would do another mini special a few months later at the school, where he would discuss the situation as well as give some other anecdotes from throughout his career and put the whole speech up on Netflix in the summer of 2022. I actually didn't watch this special when it first came out, and I just saw it for the first time while making this video. But I have to say, this isn't necessarily a great comedy special, but that's clearly not what Dave meant it to be in the first place. It is, however, A great speech and a great window into the soul of Dave Chappelle. He talks in depth about how his experiences at Duke Ellington as a young teen and the people he met, both students and teachers alike, helped shape him into the man that he was during the beginning of his career and the man that he is today. He considers the community of Duke Ellington like family, so it especially hurt him when the current students of the school were so aggressively against him after the closer. There are a lot of great gems in this speech, but I think the most important part to focus on for the sake of this video is the ending and the ultimate message that Dave wants to get across to both the students and the world at large.
If you have a better idea, then express it. If you have more talent than me, then display it. And you can beat me with certainty. This is what our genre is about. The fact that if my name was on this theater and the kid that walked through that door would feel anything other than pride in their school and in their endeavors, well, that's untenable to me. Rather than give this theater my name, I would like to give these students my message. This theater should be called the Theater for Artistic Freedom and Expression. I want that for myself, and I want it for every student that's educated at this school.
For anyone who wonders why Dave won't stop doing trans jokes, or why Dave fought so hard to keep his creative freedom back during the Chappelle show, or why Dave came back to Hollywood at all, it can all be found in this speech and specifically in this quote here. The beloved and all-time great TV series The Wire has a large amount of memorable quotes, and outside of shit, my favorite has always been, a man's gotta have a code. You don't have to agree with Dave and the things he says, the things he does, or what he stands for. I'm a huge fan of his, and even I don't agree with everything about him. But I have to respect that he has a code and he sticks to it. I also have to respect that his code is not a selfish one. It can be seen as selfish and he can exploit it selfishly sometimes, but his message of standing for artistic freedom is not meant just for him. It's meant for all artists. Dave doesn't want any artist silenced by those who disagree with their art. If you disagree with a joke that Dave tells, Dave doesn't want you to shut up. He wants you to tell a better one. He wants you to express yourself as freely as he expresses himself, and then we can see who has the more powerful message. I didn't watch this What's in the Name special when it came out because, at the time, I'd had enough of Dave and the stances that he was taking back then. So by the time he dropped his next special, I had no idea what I was in for. Dave Chappelle sort of shadow dropped his final Netflix special titled The Dreamer on December 31st of 2023, basically ending that year and bringing in the next one with one more bang. And this was my first time watching a Dave Chappelle special where my expectations were low. That rush of excitement and anticipation that was coursing through me before watching his first Netflix special was pretty much gone. It had slowly faded away after being let down with Sticks and Stones and then with the closer right after. So when I watched The Dreamer, I wasn't really ready for what I saw. Against all odds, The Dreamer turned out to be arguably the best special Dave has ever released.
I ain't doing trans jokes no more. You know what I'm gonna do tonight? Tonight, I'm doing all handicap jokes. Well, they're not as organized as the gays. There's probably a handicap in the back right now, because that's where they usually make them sit. I came here to laugh at transgender people. I didn't know this nigga was gonna make jokes about us. Come on, y'all, let's get the fuck up out of here.
This special has everything that a Dave Chappelle fan would want. It's got topical jokes about current events like the submersible joke. It's got flashback stories about Dave's younger years in the business and all the strange encounters that he had, like the one with Jim Carrey. It's got completely out of left field jokes like the safe deposit box joke. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but he actually wrote good trans jokes in this special.
It's about a black transgender woman whose pronoun is sadly nigger. It's a tearjerker. At the end of the play, she dies of loneliness because white liberals don't know how to speak to her. Sad.
And best of all, he kept the trans jokes to a minimum so that they didn't take over a majority of the special. Dave was on fire throughout this whole thing in a way that I hadn't really seen since, I don't know, Killing Him Softly. There's really not any misses throughout this whole special. Even the worst jokes still get a good laugh out of me. I've seen it like 5 times now, and I still laugh my ass off as if it was brand new. But it is clear that through it all, Dave really wanted to talk about what the whole world at the time was talking about, which was Will Smith slapping the dog shit out of Chris Rock.
Chris was involved in what we blacks might even consider a goddamn 9/11. And I called him on FaceTime, and he picked up. I said, well, did it hurt? And he said, yes, nigga, it hurt. He said, I refuse to be a victim. And I was backstage looking like, nigga, watch the tape.
He wraps up the Chris Rock and Will Smith jokes by saying that he understands both sides. He is Will Smith. He's the man who can't take it anymore and will slap the shit out of the next person who disrespects him. But he's also Chris Rock. He's the man who can be slapped or disrespected but keep his composure to avoid ruining his own life. Dave has proved this over the years multiple times. He knew how to keep quiet about the things that Hollywood and the media were doing to him behind the scenes, but he also knew how to fight back when the time was right and demand what he was owed from them. He was gracious to the students of Duke Ellington who disagreed with his trans jokes and let them air their grievances and stop him from having the school's theater named after him. But he also made sure to go there himself and give them his side of things to their faces to make sure they understood that he was not their enemy. He ends the special, as he loves to do, by telling one more long-winded story with an important message. And this one might be my favorite of them all. He tells the story of when he was first starting out in comedy, and he was basically screwed over by the promoter of the venue when the promoter didn't pay a neighboring club full of Russian mobsters to keep their music down during Dave's set. So naturally, the music came on during Dave's performance and ruined the whole show. Dave gets mad at the mobsters, not knowing that it wasn't their fault, and also not knowing that they were Russian mobsters, and almost gets himself killed because he felt that his dream had died that night. But luckily, the mobsters spared Dave because they saw his passion and realized that he was just a kid with a dream who would do anything to make it a reality. And in the end, they had to respect that. And then he says this.
I learned one of the most valuable lessons of my life, and I have to share it with you. In your life, in any given moment, the strongest dream in that moment wins that moment. I am a very powerful dreamer. I dreamed tonight, this very night, as a 14-year-old boy, and I am living it as a 50-year-old man. My dreams are very strong. Today, I walked all around Washington. I used to be poor in this city, and all day, people just said, hey, Dave, like they knew me personally, and I felt like I knew them. And I say to myself, my God, Dave, what a powerful dream.
The Dreamer was performed and filmed at the same place in Washington, D.C. that Dave performed and filmed his Killing Him Softly special. Except now it was 25 years later, and a lot had changed in Dave's life. He was no longer that struggling young comedian with a new wife and a baby to feed. Now he was a global superstar and a legend of the game with a fully grown family and enough money to last all of their lifetimes. He had a dream and he made it a reality, and this special was made in honor of his fellow dreamers, those that could see beyond their current surroundings in hopes of finding something greater. I had been watching Dave Chappelle for decades, and even though he had provided countless laughs and many great lessons through his art, this was the first time he had actually inspired me. Just like Dave, I've been a dreamer my whole life. I've always imagined myself doing great things and reaching great heights through art and entertainment. My problem, and where I've always differed from Dave, is that I could never pin down how to actually do that. Dave has always wanted to be a comedian. He had a clear path to follow in order to achieve his goals. But me, I used to want to be an artist, then a guitarist, then a photographer, then a director, then a screenwriter, then a rapper, then a producer, and everything in between all of that. I could never find the dream that actually fit me and one that I was willing to chase. But then, during COVID, I started this YouTube channel, and for about 2 years, I made videos here and there and dropped them sporadically, never really finding much success Until late 2023, when my first Boondocks video blew up a year and a half after I released it. 2023 was not a great year for me for multiple reasons. But by the end of the year, things were starting to look up. And one of the biggest reasons for that is that it felt like I had finally found my dream. I had finally found what I wanted to do and what I wanted to be great at, which was this: YouTube and making videos. And while I was riding that high and was feeling like I actually had some direction in life, I watched The Dreamer. And I watched Dave talk about the importance of a dream and what it's like to be inside of a powerful dream. Seeing what Dave was able to accomplish, not just in reaching the pinnacle of his industry, but in how he did it, by never compromising his morals and staying true to what he believed was right, even when it seemed to hurt him in his dream at the time. And then seeing how that all paid off in the end, that made me want to chase this dream even harder. I don't know what it's like to be Dave Chappelle and make my dreams a reality. But I can say that when I make these videos and when I put them out to the world and you guys all respond and show your support, I feel like I get a taste of what living your dreams really feels like. And that feeling is what drives me to keep going. Most likely, I will never reach the heights of a Dave Chappelle. And I know he's never been a perfect role model or a perfect man. But despite his faults, I can't think of a better artist to look up to. In terms of artistic integrity, he's everything an aspiring artist would want to be. Respected by fans and his peers, controversial but unwavering in that controversy because it all stems from him standing on his core principles and beliefs. And lastly, he's an artist who wants to see other artists flourish whether they agree with him or not. Dave Chappelle is the greatest comedian of all time. He's the GOAT. This video can serve as proof of that. But that's not why I made it. I made this video because Dave Chappelle is my favorite comedian. And to me, that's very different from being the greatest and infinitely more important. Whether you love him, hate him, respect him, whatever. I hope you all have some figure in your life who inspires you to chase your dreams the way Dave Chappelle has always inspired me.